Billionaire hires a caretaker for his ill child, sets up surveillance, and uncovers a startling revelation. The Harrison estate loomed grandly against the Chicago skyline, its glass panes catching the fading September sunlight. Victor Harrison gazed out from his penthouse office, a tumbler of bourbon resting on the oak desk. His deep blue eyes were focused on a far-off spot as his thoughts drifted through the hollow passages of his existence. The gentle creak of the door snapped him back to the present. Emily, his longtime assistant, stepped in with a dark folder in hand. "Mr. Harrison, the resumes you requested," she said in a professional tone, though Victor sensed a hint of worry. She knew the circumstances all too well. "How many this time?" he asked, swiveling his chair toward her. 20, all with stellar references and experience caring for children with special needs. Victor picked up the folder, swiftly scanning the pages. Each applicant seemed flawless on paper, but he was well aware that appearances could be misleading. "Arrange interviews with the top 3 for tomorrow," he instructed. Emily hesitated. Dr. Reynolds called. "He insists that Ethan needs consistency. Changing caregivers every few months isn't helping." "I paid Dr. Reynolds to manage my son's health, not to advise me on household matters," Victor interjected, his voice as cold as the evening breeze. Emily nodded, understanding it was time to leave. Before exiting, she paused at the door. "Ethan asked if you'd join him for dinner tonight." A muscle tightened in Victor's jaw. "I have a conference call with investors in Hong Kong. Tell him," he stopped, recalling the crestfallen look Ethan always wore when he received an apology. "Cancel the call. I'll be there at 7. Alone once more, Victor opened his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph. Elizabeth smiled back at him, her hazel eyes glowing with the same intensity Ethan had inherited. 5 years had passed since the tragedy, yet the pain remained as raw as ever. Downstairs, he heard Ethan's familiar cough, followed by the soothing voice of Miss Collins, the temporary caregiver. She was the 6th this year. Victor knew he needed to find someone permanent, but the thought of entrusting his son to a stranger filled him with dread. Descending the marble staircase, he found Ethan in the living room, wrapped in his favorite quilt, watching a nature documentary. When Ethan saw him, the boy grinned, and Victor felt a familiar ache in his chest. Ethan was the spitting image of Elizabeth, from his sandy curls to the freckles dusting his cheeks. "Dad, are you having dinner with me tonight?" "Yes, buddy. How about we order that pizza you love?" Ethan's eyes sparkled, but a sudden cough interrupted his joy. Miss Collins hurried over with the inhaler, and Victor watched helplessly as his son struggled to breathe. Moments like these reminded him of what was at stake and how fiercely he needed to protect the one person who still mattered. Later, after tucking Ethan into bed, Victor sat in his private study, switching on the monitors that displayed every corner of the house. It was his nightly routine to ensure everything was in order and his son was safe. Tomorrow, he would interview the candidates, and one of them would join the tightly controlled world he had built. Among the resumes, one name stood out: Olivia Bennett. Her credentials were impeccable, her experience with ailing children extensive. But it was her photo that caught his attention, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, unlike the rehearsed expressions of the others. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his attorney, Daniel. "Victor, I've received the paperwork for the new caregiver. Should I include the same confidentiality clauses, all of them, and add one about the surveillance cameras? You know that might deter good candidates, right?" Victor glanced at Elizabeth's photo again. Anyone with nothing to hide won't mind the monitoring. Hanging up, he turned his attention back to Olivia's resume. Tomorrow, he would meet her in person, and something told him this interview would be unlike the others. Whether it was her exceptional qualifications or the sincerity in her photo, there was something about her that intrigued him. And Victor Harrison wasn't one to be easily intrigued. The Harrison Enterprises conference room was quiet when Olivia Bennett entered. The natural light streaming through the large windows contrasted with the room's austere ambience. Dressed in a simple navy outfit, she maintained a calm demeanor, though her heart raced. Victor Harrison observed her from across the glass table, scrutinizing every detail. His trained eyes noted her steady hands, her unwavering eye contact, and the calm confidence she exuded. "Ms. Bennett," he began, his tone measured, "your resume is impressive. 6 years of caring for children with special needs. Specialization in pediatric nursing. Exemplary references. Almost too perfect." Olivia smiled faintly. "Mr. Harrison, I've learned that perfection is a myth. What I offer isn't perfection, but unwavering dedication and honesty." Her response surprised him. Most candidates would rush to assure him of their competence. "Tell me about your last experience," he asked, leaning back in his chair. "I cared for young Samuel for 3 years. He had cystic fibrosis. It was challenging but deeply rewarding. Unfortunately," she paused, and Victor noticed a flicker of emotion in her eyes, "Samuel passed away 6 months ago. That's when I decided to take some time to process the loss." "And what makes you think you're ready to take on another complex case?" "Because grief taught me compassion, not fear. Your son deserves someone who understands that care goes beyond medication and procedures." Victor stood and walked to the window. "Ms. Bennett, I need to be clear. This role requires more than professional skill. There are security cameras throughout the house. Your privacy will be limited. Many find it too invasive. I understand your need to protect your son, Mr. Harrison. If I were in your position, I'd likely do the same," she said, pausing meaningfully. "But I hope that in time, you'll see that trust is built through actions, not surveillance." He turned, staring at her intently. "Are you questioning me, Miss Bennett?" "No, sir. I'm being honest, as I promised at the start of this conversation." A heavy silence filled the room. Emily, watching from the doorway, held her breath. In her 15 years of working for Victor, she'd never seen anyone subtly challenge him. "Would you like to meet Ethan?" Victor's question surprised even himself. On the mansion's 3rd floor, Ethan was finishing his physical therapy session when they entered. His hazel eyes lit up at the sight of his father, but it was Olivia who captured his attention. "You must be Ethan," she said, approaching with a warm smile. "I hear you're a fan of nature documentaries." The boy's face brightened. "Do you like them too?" "I love them. Did you know that humpback whales sing different songs every year?" Ethan laughed, a sound that made Victor freeze. He hadn't heard that laugh in weeks. For the next hour, Olivia chatted with Ethan about deep-sea creatures, coral reefs, and her volunteer work at an aquarium. Victor observed, noting how she seamlessly incorporated breathing exercises into the conversation without Ethan realizing he was being treated. "Dad!" Ethan called out when Olivia left to fetch water. "She's different from the others." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, she is." Later, in his office, Victor reviewed the employment contract. Emily entered with a cup of coffee. "The other candidates are still waiting, sir." "Cancel the interviews," he replied, without looking up. "Ms. Bennett starts tomorrow." "Are you sure?" She was quite direct during the interview. Victor glanced up. "Exactly why. Ethan needs someone who isn't afraid to speak the truth, even if it means challenging me at times." That evening, while reviewing the surveillance footage, Victor paused at the recording of Olivia's interaction with Ethan. There was something about the way she engaged with his son, a blend of professionalism and genuine care, that he couldn't ignore. His phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Contract sent to Ms. Bennett. She signed and returned it. Starts tomorrow at 7 a.m. Victor looked at the photo of Elizabeth on his desk. "What would you think of her, my love?" he whispered into the silence. The response came in the form of a memory. Elizabeth always said that eyes never deceive, and Olivia Bennett's eyes revealed a truth he couldn't ignore. Turning off the monitors, Victor allowed himself a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, he had found someone who could bring light not only into Ethan's life, but into the entire house that had been shrouded in darkness for so long. The morning arrived with a gentle mist that blanketed the gardens of the Harrison estate. Olivia arrived promptly at 7 a.m., carrying a simple bag and a small gift wrapped in colorful paper. Emily greeted her in the foyer, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Mr. Harrison is on a video call, but he left detailed instructions about Ethan's routine, Emily explained, leading her up the stairs. The medication list, schedules, and emergency contacts are in his room. On the second floor, they paused in front of a door adorned with glowing stars. Emily hesitated before opening it. "Ms. Bennett, Ethan had a rough night. The weather change always affects his breathing." Olivia nodded in understanding. "May I see the records from last night? It would help me understand his breathing patterns." Inside the room, Ethan slept fitfully, the heart monitor beside his bed emitting a soft, steady beep. Olivia approached quietly, studying the vital signs with practiced eyes. "Good morning, little explorer," she whispered as Ethan began to stir. The boy opened his eyes slowly, a faint smile spreading across his pale face. "You're really here?" "Of course I am, and I brought something special for you," she said, handing him the wrapped gift. Ethan carefully unwrapped it, revealing a miniature galaxy projector. "Wow, it's like having the universe in my room. I thought we could create our own starry sky here. But first, how about a healthy breakfast to get your energy up?" Across the mansion, Victor watched the interaction through the cameras. Something about the ease with which Olivia moved around the room, the way she managed to entertain Ethan while subtly checking his vitals, intrigued him. Throughout the morning, Olivia established a gentle routine. She turned breathing exercises into fun games, told stories during the nebulizer sessions, and managed to get Ethan to take all his medication without protest. At lunchtime, Victor decided to make an unexpected appearance. He found Ethan seated at the kitchen table, eating a colorful soup that wasn't part of his usual menu. "What kind of soup is this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's my special recipe," Olivia replied confidently. "It's nutrient-rich and low in sodium, following all dietary restrictions. The secret is in the fresh herbs." Ethan held up his spoon excitedly. "Dad, try it. It's like magic. It doesn't taste like medicine." Victor hesitated before accepting the spoonful his son offered. The flavor surprised him. It was genuinely delicious. "Ms. Bennett, may I speak with you privately?" In his office, Victor closed the door. "I appreciate your initiative, but any changes to Ethan's diet need to be approved first." "With all due respect, Mr. Harrison, the soup adheres to all dietary restrictions. I have the full breakdown here," she said, handing him a detailed sheet. "Besides, I've noticed Ethan is resistant to eating. Making meals enjoyable could aid his recovery." Victor studied the document, searching for flaws. He found none. "There's something else I need to discuss," she continued. "Ethan mentioned he'd like to see the garden, especially with the weather improving. A few minutes of morning sunlight would be good for him." "Absolutely not. The fresh air could strengthen his immune system," Olivia countered. "Under controlled conditions," she added. "Keeping him completely isolated won't protect him forever." The silence that followed was tense. Victor wrestled internally between his need for control and the logic of her words. "1 week," he finally said. "Show me positive results in a week, and I'll consider your suggestion about outdoor activities." That evening, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Olivia was organizing her notes when she came across a drawing he had made. It depicted 3 stick figures, one tall, one small, and one medium, all smiling under a starry sky. The next morning, Victor found the drawing on his desk with a note attached. "Mr. Harrison, Ethan has a heart bigger than his room and dreams bigger than his limitations. He drew this yesterday, talking about how wonderful it would be to see the stars for real someday. Sometimes the greatest acts of protection involve allowing small, calculated risks. Respectfully, Olivia Bennett." Sitting back in his chair, Victor studied the drawing. Elizabeth's words echoed in his mind. "Love without freedom is a gilded cage, my love." For the first time in years, he wondered if his protective methods were stifling Ethan's chances of truly living. On the monitor, he watched Olivia adjusting the galaxy projector, creating a private universe on Ethan's ceiling. Ethan laughed, pointing at the constellations, his eyes shining with a joy Victor hadn't seen in a long time. Perhaps, Victor thought, it was time to let go. Olivia's first month at the Harrison estate passed quickly, bringing subtle but meaningful changes. The most noticeable was Ethan's frequent smile, which now echoed through the once silent halls. Victor watched through the cameras, noticing how his son seemed stronger, more vibrant, despite the limitations of his condition. One particularly clear morning, Victor canceled an important meeting when he saw on the monitor that Ethan was having a breathing episode. He rushed to his son's room, only to find Olivia already handling the situation with a calm confidence that left him speechless. "Breathe with me, Captain," she said softly, sitting behind Ethan on the bed and guiding his breathing. "Remember our story about the diver? Let him rise to the surface slowly." Ethan, leaning against her, followed her rhythm, his small hands gripping her arms. Victor stood in the doorway, unnoticed, observing the intimacy of the moment. "That's it," Olivia continued. "Now tell me 3 things you can see." "The galaxy projector," Ethan said, breathing more steadily. "My ocean book and Mom's picture." Victor's heart clenched. Elizabeth's photo sat on the nightstand, smiling eternally at the son who resembled her so much. "Great. 2 things you can touch. My blanket and your necklace." Olivia smiled, letting Ethan play with the small anchor pendant she always wore. "Perfect. Something you can smell. The chamomile tea you made." The episode passed gradually, leaving Ethan exhausted but stable. When he finally fell asleep, Olivia tucked him in with tender care. Turning around, she was startled to see Victor. "Mr. Harrison, I didn't see you there. How long have you been using this technique with him?" "The grounding technique?" "Since the 2nd week. It helps prevent panic during episodes by focusing on the senses." Victor ran a hand through his hair, a rare display of vulnerability. "Why wasn't I informed? It's in the daily report I send you," she replied gently. "Page 3, paragraph 2 of last week's report." He recalled the document he had barely glanced at, too preoccupied with business. Guilt washed over him. "Mr. Harrison," Olivia hesitated before continuing. "May I make a suggestion?" He nodded, still watching his sleeping son. "Ethan needs his father as much as he needs his medication. Your presence has a therapeutic effect that no treatment can replace." "I have a company to run," he defended, though his voice lacked conviction. "And you have a son to love," she replied firmly. "Let me show you something." Olivia opened a folder she kept organized in the room. "These are Ethan's vital sign records. Notice how the numbers improve significantly when you're present. Yesterday, during the dinner you shared, his oxygen level stayed stable for hours." Victor examined the graph, his analytical mind recognizing the pattern she pointed out. "Why do you keep such detailed records?" "Because care isn't just about administering medication, Mr. Harrison. It's about understanding every aspect of well-being." That afternoon, Victor canceled all his meetings. For the first time in years, he spent hours with Ethan, listening to him talk about his ocean discoveries, the stories Olivia told, and his dreams of seeing the sea someday. Through the security cameras, Olivia discreetly watched the interaction between father and son, a soft smile on her lips. Emily approached her in the monitor room. "First time I've seen him like this since Elizabeth passed," the assistant remarked. "He's so afraid of losing Ethan that sometimes he forgets to live," Olivia replied. "How did you manage to convince him?" "I didn't." The unexpected call from Lucas made them both step back quickly. Isabella cleared her throat, her face flushed. "We should check on him," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. Leonardo nodded, running a hand through his hair as if to shake off the moment. "Yes, of course." They found Lucas in the living room, his face lit up with excitement. "Look what I found!" he exclaimed, holding up an old photo album. "It's Mom and Dad when they were younger." Leonardo's expression softened as he took the album from his son. "Where did you find this, champ?" "In the attic," Lucas replied, grinning. I was exploring, and there it was. Isabella smiled, though her heart was still racing from the earlier moment. That's a wonderful find, Lucas. Would you like to look through it together? Lucas nodded eagerly, and they all sat down on the couch. As Leonardo flipped through the pages, he began to share stories about Catherine, how they met, their adventures, and the little quirks that made her so special. Lucas listened intently, his eyes wide with fascination. Mom loved the ocean just like me, he said, pointing to a photo of Catherine standing on a beach. She did. Leonardo agreed, his voice warm with nostalgia. She used to say the sea had a way of making everything feel possible. Isabella watched the interaction, her heart swelling with emotion. It was clear how much Lucas needed these moments, these connections to his mother. And it was equally clear how much Leonardo had been holding back, protecting himself from the pain of those memories. Later that evening, after Lucas had gone to bed, Isabella found Leonardo in the study, staring out the window. He needed that, she said softly, stepping into the room. Leonardo turned to her, his expression thoughtful. I've been so focused on protecting him from loss that I've been denying him the chance to remember her. It's not too late, Isabella replied. He's stronger than you think, and he needs to know her, even if it's through stories and photos. Leonardo nodded, his gaze softening. Thank you, Isabella, for everything. She smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her. You're welcome, Leonardo. The days that followed brought a new sense of openness to the Cortez household. Leonardo began to share more about Catherine, and Lucas blossomed with the newfound connection to his mother. Isabella continued to care for Lucas, her bond with him growing stronger each day. And though the tension between her and Leonardo remained, it was laced with a growing understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken feelings that lingered between them. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, Isabella found Leonardo in the garden, staring at the horizon. Penny for your thoughts? She asked, joining him. He smiled faintly. Just thinking about how much has changed, how much I've been holding back. Change can be good, she said gently. It's not always easy, but it's necessary. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. Isabella, I'm not sure how to do this, how to let someone in again. You don't have to figure it all out at once, she replied. Just take it one step at a time. He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. Thank you for being here, for helping Lucas, for helping me. She reached out, placing a hand on his arm. You're not alone, Leonardo, and you don't have to be. As they stood there, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air, Isabella felt a sense of hope. The walls that had been built to protect were slowly coming down, and in their place, a new foundation was being laid, one built on trust, understanding, and the possibility of something more. Lucas's voice broke the moment as he ran into the office, dripping wet. Margaret hurried behind him with a towel. I'm sorry, Mr. Cortez. He insisted on showing off his swimming. Leonardo glanced from Lucas to Isabella, then at the photo of Catherine on his desk. 3 worlds, each demanding a piece of his heart. Lucas, you need to dry off and warm up, Isabella said, regaining her composure. Come on, before you catch a cold. As she led Lucas out, Leonardo called after her. Miss Martinez. She stopped but didn't turn. Tomorrow night, after Lucas has gone to sleep, can we continue our conversation? I'm not sure we should, Mr. Cortez. Please, he said, his vulnerability surprising her. We need to sort this out. For Lucas. For Lucas, she agreed quietly, knowing they were both lying. It wasn't just for Lucas, and that was exactly the problem. That night, Leonardo turned off the cameras in Lucas's room. Some things, he realized, needed to be felt with the heart, not observed through a screen. A storm hit Boston the next evening, bringing rain, strong winds, and a severe respiratory crisis for Lucas. Leonardo and Isabella spent the night in his room, each coping with fear in their own way. She stayed calm, administering medication and monitoring his vitals, while he paced, alternating between calls to doctors and barely contained panic. "His heart rate is too high," Isabella murmured, her eyes on the monitor. "We need to calm him down." "I've already called an ambulance," Leonardo replied, pale with worry. "No," Isabella said firmly. "Taking him to the hospital in this storm will only make things worse. Trust me." Their gazes met through the dim light of the star projector, Lucas's labored breaths filling the silence. "Mr. Cortez," she called softly, "I need you to sit here." "What?" "Please, sit on the bed and lean back against the pillows. Lucas will feel your breathing and follow." Leonardo obeyed reluctantly, allowing Isabella to position Lucas against his chest. Gradually, Lucas's breathing matched his father's rhythm, his small body relaxing. "Tell a story," Lucas whispered weakly. Leonardo froze. He wasn't used to telling stories. Catherine had always done that. Isabella reached out, placing a comforting hand on his. "It was a summer night," he began hesitantly, "when your mother and I met. She was dancing in the rain on campus, and I thought she was crazy." The memories started flowing, each one finding its voice. Lucas listened, fighting sleep, his eyes wide with fascination. "She said life was too short to wait for the sun," Leonardo continued, his voice thick with emotion, "and that sometimes you have to dance in the storm." A loud clap of thunder made Lucas cringe. Isabella quickly adjusted the star projector, casting a soft, ocean-like glow around the room. "Look, Captain," she whispered, "even storms can be beautiful when seen from the right place." Lucas finally drifted into a peaceful sleep, his breathing steady. Leonardo, however, remained still, as if any movement might shatter the fragile peace they had achieved. "You should rest," he said softly to Isabella, who had stayed by Lucas's side through it all. "I'll stay with him." "I know you can stay with him," she replied, arranging the covers. "But you don't have to be alone." The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of rain against the windows and Lucas's soft breathing. "Do you know what else Catherine told me that night?" murmured Leonardo after a long moment. "That some people are like lighthouses," he continued, his voice low. "They don't drive away the storm, but they help us navigate it." Isabella felt the weight of those words, understanding what he was really saying. "Mr. Cortez." "Leonardo," he corrected, his tone soft. "After tonight, I think we can dispense with the formalities." She nodded, a small smile on her lips. "Leonardo, sometimes lighthouses need guidance too. That's why they work in pairs," he replied, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart leap. The storm outside began to subside, but the one raging inside them was only beginning to gain strength. Lucas stirred in his sleep, muttering something about stars and oceans, unaware of the significant moment unfolding around him. Margaret found them like this the next morning, Lucas sleeping peacefully between them, Leonardo and Isabella sitting on opposite sides of the bed, united by their shared vigil, and something else neither of them was ready to name. "Coffee's ready," she announced softly, noticing the dark circles under their eyes. "And the medical reports you requested have arrived, Mr. Cortez." "Thank you, Margaret," he replied, still not taking his eyes off Isabella. "Please cancel my appointments for today. I'll stay at home." The assistant smiled discreetly as she left. Some storms, she thought, bring more than destruction. They bring renewal. The end of November brought with it not only the most intense cold, but also a noticeable change in the dynamics of the Cortez mansion. After the night of the storm, Leonardo started working more from home. His eyes often strayed from the financial reports to observe Lucas's therapy sessions or the moments of study with Isabella. One particularly cold afternoon, while Lucas was taking his post-lunch nap, Leonardo found Isabella in the library, organizing materials for the boys' school project. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Isabella straightened up, sensing the seriousness in his voice. "About Lucas, about us. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken meanings. Richard found out more information about Catherine's accident, he continued, moving closer. The sabotage. It wasn't a competitor. Isabella left the papers on the table, giving her full attention to Leonardo. It was someone inside the company, someone I trusted. Her voice trembled slightly. We found out yesterday. The former head of security, Maxwell Bennett, confessed everything to the police. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand why I built all these walls, why I installed so many cameras, why I'm so afraid of trusting. She added softly, yes. He moved closer, stopping a few steps away from her. But you broke down every wall I built with your honesty, your dedication to Lucas, A coughing fit from Lucas, heard through the monitor, interrupted the moment. They both moved instinctively toward the door, but the sound soon ceased, indicating that the boy had gone back to sleep peacefully. See, Isabella said with a small smile. Not all interruptions are emergencies. Leonardo nodded, swallowing dryly. Catherine always said that true love isn't just about protecting, but about setting free. I didn't understand that until you came along. Isabella took a step back. I'm your employee. I look after your son. We can't or won't. The question caught her off guard. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I have my own walls, she finally admitted. William wasn't just a patient I lost. He was my brother. For 3 years, I cared for him, battling cystic fibrosis. I gave up everything, relationships, career, personal life. When he left, she took a deep breath. I promised myself that I would never again allow myself to love someone I could lose. Leonardo reduced the distance between them, taking her hands in his. So, we're two cowards, two wounded protectors, she corrected, not resisting the touch. Lucas asked me something yesterday, he said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. He asked if it was wrong to be happy, even though he missed his mother. Isabella felt tears forming in her eyes. And what did you say? I said that Catherine would be furious if we thought that honoring her memory meant living in sadness. At that moment, the sound of footsteps in the hallway made them separate quickly. Margaret entered, stopping abruptly as she sensed the charged atmosphere. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Cortez. The council is waiting on the line. Leonardo nodded, reluctant to break the moment. I'll be there in a minute. When Margaret left, he turned to Isabella one last time. Have dinner with me tonight, after Lucas goes to sleep. I don't think it's appropriate. Not as boss and employee, he said, a soft smile tugging at his lips. As Leonardo and Isabella. She hesitated, years of self-preservation, fighting the urge to say yes. And Lucas already knows. In fact, he was the one who suggested that I stop being silly and ask you to dinner. An involuntary smile appeared on her lips. He said that in those exact words. So, what do you say? Before she could answer, Lucas's sleepy voice sounded through the monitor. Dad! Isabella! Saved by the gong, she muttered as she moved toward the door. That's not a no, observed Leonardo. It's not a yes either, she replied, but a smile followed her up the stairs, making her heart dance in a way it hadn't for years. In Lucas's room, she found the boy sitting on the bed, rubbing his sleepy eyes. I dreamt about Mommy, he said. When she sat down next to me, she was smiling and said she was happy. Isabella felt her heart squeeze. Is that so? Yes. And she said that sometimes you have to be brave to be happy. She looked at the door where Leonardo was now standing, watching the scene with soft eyes. You know something, Lucas? I think your mother was very wise. So, you're having dinner with Dad? Isabella laughed, surprised by the boy's insight. We'll see. Now, how about we finish that project on Wales? The dinner took place not that night, but a week later when the first snow of winter began to fall on Boston. Leonardo had prepared everything with meticulous care. The table on the enclosed, heated veranda was decorated with soft lights. The menu was specially chosen, and a small jazz ensemble played in the background. Isabella arrived punctually at 8 after putting Lucas to bed. She wore a simple navy blue dress that made her eyes sparkle like sapphires. "I thought you said no," teased Leonardo, pulling out the chair for her. "Technically, I never said no," she replied, smiling. "I just put it off until I was sure." "Sure of what?" "That it wouldn't harm Lucas." Leonardo poured wine for them both, his movements deliberately slow. "And you came to a conclusion?" "Actually, it was Lucas who helped me decide." She took a small sip of wine and reached into her pocket. She handed him a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, 3 figures holding hands under a starry sky. In the top corner, a 4th figure surrounded by a golden glow was smiling at the group. "He said you're our family," she explained softly. "You, him, and me, down here in Catherine." Her voice faltered a little. "Blessing us from above." Leonardo stared at the drawing for a long moment, his eyes welling up. He has the same gift as his mother for seeing beyond appearances. Dinner passed easily, with conversation flowing naturally between light and deep topics. They shared stories about their lives before they met, about William, about Catherine, and the fears they still carried, but also the hopes they were beginning to nurture. "You know what I miss most about Catherine?" Leonardo said as they shared dessert. "Her ability to see beauty in everything, even in storms." "Like Lucas observes," Isabella added, her voice soft. "Like you too," he replied, reaching for her hand across the table. "You brought color back into our lives." Before she could respond, a familiar sound came from Lucas's monitor, coughing, followed by crying. "I'm going to check on him," Isabella said, getting up to leave. "No!" Leonardo stopped her, holding her hand. "Let me go. Stay and enjoy the wine." In Lucas's room, Leonardo found his son sitting on the bed, silent tears streaming down his face. "Hey, champ. Nightmare?" Leonardo asked gently. Lucas shook his head. "Fear of what?" "Of Isabella leaving like Mom." Leonardo sat on the bed, pulling his son close. "Lucas, look at me. Your mother never wanted to leave us and Isabella. She's not going anywhere. I can't promise what the future holds, son, but I can promise that I'll do everything I can to keep her in our lives. Will that do?" Lucas nodded, snuggling into his father's arms. "Dad, do you still love Mom?" Leonardo kissed the top of his son's head. "I'll always love your mother. She gave me you, the greatest gift of my life." He smiled down at his son. "So, it's okay to love Isabella too?" "Yes, son. The heart has infinite room for love." When Leonardo returned to the balcony, he found Isabella gazing at the falling snow. She was holding his coat, which he had forgotten on the chair. "Is Lucas all right?" she asked as he approached. "Yes. He just needed some answers." "And did you get them?" she asked, turning to face him. "I think we all did today." He took the jacket from her hands and placed it on his shoulders. "Actually," he continued, "I think we all got some answers." Isabella smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. "Don't say anything yet," he asked. "Just dance with me." Soft music filled the room as they swayed slowly. The snow fell outside, creating an almost magical atmosphere. "Catherine would be proud," Isabella whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "Of what?" Leonardo asked, his voice low. "Of seeing you and Lucas living, not just surviving." Leonardo gently pushed her away so he could look into her eyes. "That's thanks to you." "No," she replied, her voice soft. "It's thanks to the 3 of us." And to her. She looked at the drawing of Lucas on the table. Thanks to her, too. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, on the heated balcony, something new was blossoming. Not just love, but a deep understanding that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as challenges. that hearts, even bruised ones, have an infinite capacity for healing and renewal. A few weeks later, when the first signs of winter's retreat began to show, the Cortez mansion faced its first major test. Lucas had developed an infection that kept him hospitalized for 3 days, leaving Leonardo and Isabella on constant alert. At the hospital, their masks of composure were starting to show cracks. Leonardo alternated between frantic calls to specialists and moments of anguished silence, while Isabella kept a tireless vigil by Lucas's bedside. "You need to rest," Leonardo insisted on the third night, finding Isabella dozing in an uncomfortable position in the armchair. "I'm fine," she replied, straightening up. "I'd rather stay here." "Why?" She hesitated before answering. "Because that's how I lost William. One night, I decided to go home and rest, and when I came back in the morning..." Leonardo crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. It was the first public display of affection between them, but at that moment, nothing else mattered except the comfort they found in each other. "He's not William," she whispered against his hair. "And you're not alone this time," he whispered back. Lucas watched the scene through squinted eyes, a small smile on his pale lips. "You look like a couple from a movie," he murmured. They both broke apart, surprised to realize that he was awake. "How are you feeling?" Isabella asked quickly, regaining her professional composure. "Hungry," Lucas replied. "Can I have something besides that transparent stuff?" He pointed to the floor. Leonardo laughed, the first genuine sound of joy in days. "I'll see what the doctors allow." Once they were alone, Lucas looked seriously at Isabella. "You love my father, don't you?" The direct question caught her off guard. "Lucas, it's okay," he insisted. "Mom appeared in my dream yesterday. She said you have a heart as big as the ocean." Isabella felt tears forming in her eyes. "Your father and you are very special to me. Then why do you still pretend you're just our babysitter?" The child's wisdom sometimes frightened her. "It's complicated, darling." "No, it's not," Lucas argued. "Love is easy. You just have to let it happen." Before she could reply, Leonardo returned with the doctor. The good news came in cascades. The infection was subsiding. The test showed significant improvement, and Lucas could go home the next day. That night, while Lucas slept soundly for the first time in days, Leonardo met Isabella in the hospital cafeteria. "The doctors say your dedication was crucial," he commented, sitting beside her. "The way you kept up the respiratory physiotherapy, even during his high fever." "I just did my job." "No," he took her hand. "You did much more than that. You fought for him like a mother would." The word hung between them, loaded with meaning. "Leonardo, marry me," he suddenly said, kneeling beside her, ignoring the curious glances from the other people in the cafeteria. "Marry me?" He nodded. "Not because Lucas needs a mother or because I feel lonely, but because you turned our house into a home. You taught me that it's possible to love deeply twice in a lifetime, in different but equally true ways." "But what about your fear of losing again?" she asked, her voice soft. "I'm still afraid," he admitted. "I probably always will be. But Catherine taught me to dance in the rain, remember? And you showed me that some dances are worth the risk." Isabella looked down at her intertwined hands, tears streaming freely down her face. "Does Lucas know about this?" she asked. Leonardo smiled. "Actually, he was the one who chose the ring." Isabella smiled through her tears, her voice steady but filled with emotion as she responded. "Leonardo, I promise to love you and Lucas with all my heart. I promise to honor Catherine's memory and the love she left behind. I promise to be your partner in every storm and every calm, to stand by you and Lucas as we build a future together. And I promise to always remind you that love, like the ocean, is vast and endless." The judge smiled warmly. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Leonardo gently cupped Isabella's face and kissed her, the soft applause of their guests blending with the gentle melody of the ocean-inspired music. Lucas, standing beside them, beamed with pride, clutching the rings tightly in his small hands. As the ceremony concluded, the guests moved to the reception area, where the tables were adorned with seashells and candles, creating a warm, enchanting atmosphere. The first dance was a tender moment, with Leonardo and Isabella swaying to a song that Catherine had loved. Lucas joined them halfway through, the three of them dancing together, a perfect symbol of their new family. Later, during the toast, Leonardo stood, holding his glass. To Isabella, he began, his voice filled with gratitude. You've brought light and love back into our lives. You've shown us that it's possible to heal, to grow, and to love again. And to Catherine, he added, raising his glass higher. Thank you for the love you gave us, for the memories we cherish, and for guiding us to this moment. This is not just a new beginning for Isabella and me, but a celebration of all the love that has shaped us. Isabella stood next, her eyes glistening. To Leonardo and Lucas, my heart is so full. You've taught me that love isn't about replacing what's lost, but about creating something beautiful from the pieces we have. And to Catherine, she said softly, thank you for trusting me with your family. I promise to honor your legacy every day. As the evening continued, laughter and joy filled the air. Lucas, now the center of attention among the guests, proudly showed off his drawing of their family, pointing out Catherine's golden glow in the corner. She's here with us, he said confidently, and everyone felt the truth in his words. When the night began to wind down, Leonardo and Isabella found a quiet moment on the balcony, the stars shining brightly above them. It's been a perfect day, Isabella whispered, leaning into him. Thank you for everything. Leonardo kissed her forehead. No, thank you for saying yes, for loving Lucas, for being here. You've made us whole again. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, they knew that their journey was just beginning. They had faced storms and loss, but they had also found love, hope, and a new sense of purpose. Together, they would navigate the tides of life, guided by the love of the past and the promise of the future. And somewhere, Catherine smiled, knowing her family was in good hands. If I were to write a letter to be kept in a memorial room, like the Cortez family did for Catherine, it would be a heartfelt message filled with gratitude, love, and the unspoken emotions that often linger in the heart. Here's what I might write. To my beloved, if you're reading this, know that you were and always will be a light in my life. I write this not to say goodbye, but to celebrate the moments we shared, the laughter that filled our days, and the quiet strength that carried us through the storms. I want you to know how deeply you were loved, not just for the big moments, but for the small ones. The way your smile could brighten even the darkest day, the way your presence made the world feel safe, and the way your kindness touched everyone around you. There are so many things I wish I had said, moments I wish I had cherished more. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that love doesn't end with goodbye. It lives on in the memories we hold, in the lessons we've learned, and in the way we carry your spirit with us every day. I promise to honor your memory by living fully, by finding joy in the little things, and by loving fiercely, just as you taught me. I'll dance in the rain, laugh at the unexpected, and cherish every moment, knowing that life is a gift, one that you made even more beautiful. Thank you for the love you gave, for the memories you left behind, and for the way you shaped who I am. You are a part of me, and that will never change. With all my heart, your name. This letter would be a way to preserve the essence of the person, to honor their impact, and to remind myself and others that love transcends time and space. It's a way to keep their spirit alive, to celebrate their life, and to find comfort in the memories they left behind. If you could write a letter like this, what would you say? What memories or feelings would you want to preserve for someone special? Feel free to share your thoughts and reflections. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your participation truly means the world to us.